Welcome to this explainer. You know, we hear about it literally nonstop. The hustle, the grind, putting in the crazy hours and supposedly never sleeping. It's a concept that absolutely saturates our culture right now. From the endless motivational quotes on our feeds to the kind of unspoken expectations we all feel at work. But here's the thing, and it's a real paradox. The exact same intense drive that propels some people to the absolute pinnacle of human achievement, well, it seems to completely crush others. Today, we're going to unpack the source material that explains exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how we can actually navigate it.
So let's just hook right into the big mystery at the center of all this. Why does immense pressure turn one person into, say, an NBA MVP while causing severe burnout, anxiety, and totally draining exhaustion in somebody else? How is it even possible that two people can subject themselves to essentially the same grueling demands, but end up with wildly different results? Well, the secret actually lies in the ecosystem of that pressure. And to really get a handle on it, we need to take a look at the extremes.
Section 1. The elite athletic mindset.
To figure this out, let's examine the elite purpose-driven hustle found in professional sports, specifically through the eyes of NBA player development coach Phil Beckner. Now, this is an environment where extreme pressure isn't just expected, it's quite literally manufactured to forge greatness. Beckner points out that true greatness doesn't come from just running fast, it comes from what you're actually running toward. He talks a lot about his early days working with future superstar Damian Lillard. You know, they weren't just spending hours in the gym blindly shooting hoops. They were rapidly running towards truth and really strict accountability. Beckner literally wasn't afraid to tell Lillard when he was slacking or distracted. They built a foundation entirely on never skipping steps. And the crazy part? This wasn't a toxic environment. It was a hyper-accountable one, where their shared goal made radical, uncomfortable honesty totally okay.
Just look at the sheer uncompromising standard we're talking about here. Beckner shared this phenomenal story about working with Giannis Antetokounmpo. So both of their flights get delayed, right? They don't land in Milwaukee until 11:30 at night. Beckner asks Giannis what time he wants to work out, obviously assuming he means the next afternoon. Giannis just says 1. He meant 1 a.m., that exact same night. When Beckner asked him, why on earth they were doing this instead of sleeping, Giannis simply said, "Phil, when I make a deal with myself, I don't negotiate." I mean, wow. That is the elite hustle right there. It's an internal, completely non-negotiable contract.
But here's the catch, and it's a big one. It isn't just blind, solitary grinding. The reason this immense pressure yields such positive results is because it sits on a very specific framework. Beckner operates on what we can call the 3 C's of elite coaching: competence, credibility, and, without a doubt the most important one, connection. An athlete is only going to endure a 1 a.m. workout and that kind of brutal accountability if they deeply, truly trust the person pushing them. If they didn't have that connection, the pressure would just break them. Keep that word in mind, connection, because it's the absolutely crucial missing link when we look at the other side of this story.
Which brings us to Section 2, the hustle culture trap. So what happens when we take that exact same demand for constant productivity and drop it onto the everyday millennial worker? We basically move from the highly controlled, supportive bubble of elite athletics right into the wild west of the modern corporate and side hustle economy. On one hand, you have these intense internet motivation channels, constantly screaming mantras at us. You've definitely heard them: pressure creates power, or average people just quit when it gets uncomfortable. Stay dangerous. It really romanticizes the grind, mimicking that elite athletic mindset, but it completely strips away the support system. It essentially tells everyday workers that if they're exhausted, well, they're just being average.
Now, contrast that hyper-elite internet mentality with this reality check. We pulled this quote directly from a recent academic study on millennial workers who are trying to navigate this hustle culture. One participant admitted, "Even during my free time, I still think about unfinished tasks and deadlines." The study uncovers a really toxic environment where work is entirely eclipsing rest and joy. These people aren't experiencing the triumph of winning an NBA championship, right? They're experiencing emotional exhaustion, social withdrawal, and a super fragile sense of self-worth that is completely tied to their daily output.
And we really need to recognize that this isn't always about, chasing personal greatness or buying into some internet guru's mantra. Hard data shows that in places like the Philippines, 73% of the workforce is taking on additional jobs and side hustles simply to survive and provide for their families. They're driven by deep familial obligations, often acting as the main breadwinners. So they're pushing themselves to the absolute brink, not to become millionaires, but literally just to make ends meet in a really unpredictable economy.
Zooming out globally, the numbers are just staggering.
The World Health Organization reports that hundreds of millions of people are working 55 hours or more every single week. Guys, this isn't sustainable greatness, it's practically a public health crisis. Workers are trading their physical and emotional well-being for this totally skewed perception of success, and it's leading to severe burnout, disrupted sleep, and really strained relationships. They are running just as hard as Giannis, but they're stuck on a treadmill that literally never stops.
So, back to our big question, why the wildly different outcomes? Why does Giannis get an MVP trophy while the millennial worker gets a panic attack? This model right here, the ecology of talent development, brilliantly illustrates the answer. It shows that you simply cannot separate the performer from their environment. The surrounding ecosystem, the family, the coaches, the culture, the level of psychological safety, that is what dictates whether pressure builds you up or breaks you down. The elite athlete has a massive team entirely dedicated to their recovery. The everyday hustler, they're often entirely alone.
Let's get into Section 3, the secret to sustainability.
So how do we synthesize these two extremes? How do we actually build an ecosystem that supports the grind instead of just punishing the person doing it? Well, let's go back to Coach Beckner for a second. The secret weapon isn't the actual workout, it's unconditional support and connection. Beckner tells this amazing story about going to Damian Lillard's 2-year-old son's birthday party. It was a massive event. He walks in, the only white guy in a packed house of family and friends, and the 2-year-old runs right up to him. He was family. That is deep, profound connection. When a coach or a manager or a partner supports you unconditionally, you can withstand almost any professional pressure because your worth as a human being isn't tied exclusively to what you produce.
So, for the everyday worker, how do we replicate that? The academic research we looked at proposes finding this sustainability through something called the PAHINGA framework. It's a highly actionable psychological intervention. It stands for promoting awareness, healing, intentional nurturing, growth, and assertiveness. But what that actually boils down to in real life is consciously asserting your boundaries. It's learning to say no and actively scheduling intentional rest. It's about shifting away from just trying to emotionally survive the stress and moving toward problem-focused coping, where you actually rebuild your environment to protect your own mental health.
As a really great metaphor for this kind of intentional rest, let's look at the philosophy behind Tantano Coffee, which was one of the sources we reviewed. Their whole thing is that true balance starts with savoring small, everyday moments. It's about finding that daily magic in something as simple as a cup of coffee, instead of constantly obsessing over the next deadline or your next side hustle task. Elite performers schedule their recovery just as rigorously as they schedule their workouts. Everyday workers absolutely need to reclaim those small moments of joy, and they need to do it without feeling the guilt of toxic productivity.
To wrap up this explainer, it's pretty clear that hustle itself isn't inherently evil, but it's also not a guaranteed magic ticket to success. It is entirely dependent on the ecosystem you build around it. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on today. Take a hard look at your environment, your support systems, and your boundaries. Is the pressure in your life crafting you into a diamond, or is it simply grinding you to dust? Take a moment to evaluate your own ecosystem and make sure you are running toward the right kind of greatness.